Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today on Classic Mini DIY. Today I have part 3 of the Mini Buyer's Guide set up for you guys. And in this episode, what I want to cover is the clutch system, the transmission, the differential, and the drive shafts and how all that connects to the wheels, as well as your gear selector system and how all that kind of stuff differed over the different years of the Mini's production cycle. Alright, so to get started, we're going to talk about the clutch. Now, I want to bring you guys kind of through this clutch system so you have a baseline understanding of where we're going. There's two different kinds of clutch systems. You have your pre-verto and your verto clutches. Now, the kind of confusing part about this is that you can have a pre-verto clutch or a verto clutch on just about any kind of transmission that was ever put on the Mini. The difference in clutch doesn't necessarily say that you're going to have a specific type of differential or drive shaft. And that confuses a lot of people who are getting into these Minis. They're like, oh, it's a pre-verto clutch, so it has to have this. Or, oh, it's a verto clutch, and this one's better than this one. Or it can get really confusing really fast. And I know that when I started in this Mini world, that was one of the most confusing parts of this car. So let's start with the pre-verto clutch. Now, this pre-verto clutch is the older style clutch system. However, most people look at this clutch system as being the kind of stronger, more race car-esque clutch system that you can get in the car. And the reason that is because the pre-verto clutch lends itself to kind of performance parts, lightening of the flywheel, lightening of the pressure plate, making the whole system much, much lighter. And I'll get into why that's a benefit in a minute. But let's talk about the way the pre-verto comes together. You have your diaphragm, you have your flywheel, your clutch disc, and then your pressure plate. And when you're assembling the pre-verto clutch, you actually have to bring all of those together at kind of the same time as you're putting it on the car. And that can be a little frustrating, but it's not impossible. And it's actually the kind of clutch that I have on my Mini, and I'll put a link to the video here of actually pulling that flywheel off. It'll kind of give you guys an idea of what that looks like when it's out of the car. Obviously, I don't want to take apart my clutch right now because it's working and it's in my car. You can do a clutch replacement in the car, but it's challenging. I'm planning on doing a video on that in the future when I do need to replace a clutch on a client's car. Now, back to lightening the whole pre-verto system. You can actually lose almost 50% of the weight of the flywheel and pressure plate system in a pre-verto clutch. And that is a considerable amount better than what you can lose in a verto clutch. And the reason that is the whole system's just a little bit more robust in the way that it comes together. So the reason you'd want to lighten your flywheel or a pressure plate, something like that, is there's kind of this equation that you can use on the Mini, and it's not perfect. It's definitely not super scientific, but it's kind of a general idea about how much power and how much benefit you're going to get from lightening these things. When you take 1 pound off of any component in the flywheel, pressure plate, power generation system that you have the potential to lose effectively 100 pounds of body weight on the car. So if you lose 5 pounds of flywheel and pressure plate weight, what you're effectively doing is losing 500 pounds on the car. And that can yield a pretty incredible benefit, especially when you're building a race car and you want something to just move. It's much easier for your car to drive a 10-pound flywheel and clutch system than it is for it to drive a 23-pound clutch system. So a lot of people want a pre-verto clutch if they are going to be using the car on the track or want something that's going to be easy to make nice and sporty, or if you're just looking for something that is classic and is relatively reliable. Now, as you get into the later years of the car, you're going to start seeing a verto clutch. And the verto clutch kind of modernized the system, but in doing so, it kind of robbed the car and the clutch and that whole system the ability to lose as much weight. And the reason that is because in that verto clutch, the weight's pretty evenly distributed across the pressure plate and the flywheel, which is where you're going to lose the majority of your weight. And in addition to that, the way the whole mounting system works just doesn't really lend itself to weight reduction. In the pre-verto system, you can actually lose 50% of the weight. So you can bring it down to 5 kilograms, right around 10 pounds, which is crazy. And you're going to see really great power gains, but it will impact the way your car idles and the way your car runs in general. So it's not all roses and flowers. There are some trade-offs to lightening that system. But moving back onto the Verto system, the way that all comes together is your clutch disc, your diaphragm, and your pressure plate are all kind of one system, where they were separate in the pre-Verto system. And that whole kind of assembly then gets mounted onto the flywheel. You're looking at something that's a little bit easier to work on because you can actually fully assemble the clutch system, place it on the flywheel, all before it goes back into the car, and then you can just slide it right onto that crankshaft. And working on that is definitely much more enjoyable. So in my opinion, the Verto clutch system is for someone who's looking for, using this on a regular, maybe everyday basis, daily driving the car, and someone who's looking for something that's really, really long lasting. Now, that's not to say the pre-Verto clutch is not long lasting. I've had my car for 7 years now, and I haven't had to replace the clutch on it since I bought it. And I really didn't have to replace the clutch when I bought it either. I just went ahead and did it because the motor was out. Now, you're going to see that kind of benefit in the Verto clutch system, and even more so, you probably won't have to replace the clutch in that car if it's been replaced recently for probably the lifetime of your ownership, unless you own the car for like 20 years or something. But aside from that, that's really the two major differences between those clutch systems. So to spice things up for you guys a little bit, I'm going to bring you guys on a little bit of a trip. And in Charlotte, I'm going to bring you to one of my most favorite mini mechanics and show you guys all the different kinds of transmission, drive shafts, differential systems that are out there on these minis in person, and give you guys a little bit of a taste of what it's like to look for a new mini and see lots of different things when you're looking for it. So let's go ahead and head out and head up to my friend's house. All right, so as you can see, I am in a garage full of minis. Now, this is obviously not my garage. In fact, none of these cars are mine. What I've done is I brought you guys to a friend of mine's house, Justin Handy, and he is, in my opinion, the mini king in North Carolina. He is the person that I go to if I don't know what I'm talking about or I don't know what to do on a project. He's the guy, he's the big guns that I call in if I ever have a problem. Now, he's currently working on this car for a client right here, and this red car and the Mini Moke that's behind me over here are his. Now, this is the first stop on a little journey I'm going to bring you guys on to show you the different transmission and clutch systems in these cars. Now, in this blue car right here, this is a Mark I Mini, and they're in the process of kind of restoring it, but also preserving it in its current state. They're not going to be repainting it because this is the original paint, so they're working to preserve it in the state that it's in right now. So kind of the patina that you're seeing around the car, all that, that's going to stay, and it's going to be a really, really beautiful car when it's done. But in this car right here, we've got an almost 100% original system going on all in the engine bay here. And this car has two specific things that I want to show you. First, this is a pre-Verto clutch, just like my car, but it uses a Hardy Spicer joint transmission drive shaft system. And I'm going to get under the car and show you guys that in a minute here, but let's go ahead and take a look in the engine compartment, and you can see exactly what makes a pre-Verto clutch just from the top-down view of it, when you're looking at it. All right, so now right off the bat, you can see that this motor is clean. This is in really great shape. It's in the process of being worked on, and I mean, it is just a gorgeous example of a original spec motor in one of these minis. Now, on the left side here, what we're looking at is the flywheel housing and the walk. And they call that a walk because it kind of looks like a walk. So on the side here, the way you can immediately tell that this is a Preverto clutch is this slave cylinder sits right on top of the flywheel housing. Now, the slave cylinder connects to your master cylinder, and in this case, it's a little bit over there. And this is what actuates, disengages, and engages your clutch. So when you press the pedal, this has a little piston inside it that's hydraulically actuated, and it pushes this piston out, and then this beam moves like this and engages and disengages that clutch. Now, one of the things that makes this motor especially unique as opposed to the other Mark I that's sitting right behind me, the red car, is that it uses a Hardy Spicer joint. And that Hardy Spicer joint is what connects the differential items, the kind of spinning parts that come out of the sides of the motor, into the drive shafts and spin the wheels when you press your gas pedal. So let's go ahead and get underneath the car and I'll show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so we have a real treat today. This blue car, I didn't mention before, is an original actual Cooper S. So what that means is that some of the stuff underneath is a little bit different looking. One of the things that's different is this Hardy Spicer joint right here. Now, this is a little bit different than most of the other minis that are out there. Later models have a CV joint like a modern car would, and the in-between stage, the ones that weren't Cooper S, had a kind of yoke system. And I'm going to show you guys that on the red car and the Moke that's also in this garage. But I wanted to start with this right here because a lot of people will say, oh, I have a Cooper S, I have this original Cooper S, and there's fast ways that you can tell right off the bat that it's an actual Cooper S motor and that it's an actual Cooper S car. But what I'm going to focus on right now is our transmission. So you have your Hardy Spicer joint right here, and then moving into the back of the transmission and where your shifter actually moves out to the shift knob. This right here is a remote shift transmission. However, it's specific to the Cooper S. The models that were remote shift on the Mini that weren't Cooper S actually have a sandwich plate in between here, which is on my car. And you can see that I'll kind of superimpose something here for you guys to see. But the remote shift gearbox has the whole rod system inside here. It's concealed and hidden from view, and can be a little challenging to work on. But in the Cooper S, you have no sandwich plate right here. It's a much more firm, structured system underneath here. So let's go ahead and move over to the red car, and I'll show you guys what the yoke system looks like, and not this Hardy Spicer joint. And I'll also show you what a rod change looks like. All right, so now moving on to the red car, we've got a little bit different system here. It's still a Preverto clutch, but what we have back here is a yoke system. And what that means is there is kind of this rubberish plastic yoke that sits in between these U-clamps. And as you spin it, you can kind of see here, there are clamps that go around this yoke and connect the drive shaft to the differential system. Now in this car we also have a different shifting system. So you can have a Preverto clutch with a rod change gear shift. And let's go ahead and flip this camera around and I'll show you exactly what a rod change looks like. On the other car we had a remote shift system. Alright, so what you can see here is on the other car, around this area, there was a full sandwich system and a fully enclosed gear shift that runs all the way to the gear shift knob. On this car, you have a rod change system, and that's these two rods right here are what your shift knob uses to engage and disengage the gears in the car. Now, it's just a little bit different. They accomplish the same goal, but on rod change systems, you'll find that people will add additional support systems on the back here, because the rod change doesn't create as firm of a kind of connection to the body of the car as the remote shift system does. At the end of a remote shift system, you have a rubber mount that holds that keeps the whole motor nice and firmly planted in the engine compartment. In a rod change system, you don't have that. You just have these two rods running back to the shifter. But the flip side is that this rod change system is much easier to work on because you can kind of see everything and it all comes off and on and doesn't take up a lot of space down here. Now, finally, I want to move on to the Moke This Moke has a 1000cc motor in it, but it has something called a magic wand shifter. And it's a little bit different than all of these systems. It goes into the car at kind of an angle. So let's go ahead and move over to the Moke and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so the last type of shifting system that I wanted to show you guys is a magic wand system. Now, this is something that's usually only on much older cars and the smaller displacement motors. So this magic wand, the difference is that it comes off in the back of the differential the same way the other ones do. However, it almost immediately goes up and kind of diagonal into the passenger compartment. And when you're shifting on a magic wand system, it's almost kind of like waving a magic wand, which is where its name came from. But this is usually on a much older car or a smaller displacement motor, like I said. Now, if you see a magic wand like this, generally it means that you're looking at a smaller displacement motor, like an 850. It's very unusual that you'll see these on a larger displacement motor unless someone put it on specifically to kind of keep it closer to original make of the car. For example, this car has a 1000cc motor that was converted to a magic wand shifter just to keep it a little bit more original and kind of match the aesthetic of the Moke. Now, generally these are kind of less desirable shifting methods. If you're looking for something that is stronger or a little bit easier to work on, you're going to want to look for something that's a rod change or a remote shift gearbox. All right, so what we have here is your clutch cover, or a walk, like I talked about before. And this sits on your flywheel housing and attaches via the bolts all the way around here. Now, the one we're looking at here is from a Verto clutch. And the way that you can tell that is the slave cylinder actually sits on a bracket much closer to the actuating arm. You can see the arm right here is much shorter than it was on the pre-Verto system. So your slave sits down like this, and the same concept applies where you press your clutch in and this actuates a piston and moves this arm to actuate and disengage and engage the clutch. The only difference is it's just much, much closer. Now, in addition to the location and placement of that slave cylinder, you're also going to see a difference in the starter motor. The starter motor has this solenoid that sits on the outside here, works more closely to a modern car than the earlier models did. In the earlier models, you'll only have the actual starter motor here and no solenoid. And what that does for you is when you turn that key, it actually engages the starter via the key. And the older motors used a starter motor where you had to turn the key, which applied power to the spark plugs, and then when you press the floor start button, that's when it would engage the flywheel and start the car up. Those are kind of the main ways that you're going to see differences between the pre-Verto and the Verto clutch. Otherwise, you'd have to actually get into the clutch system to see the differences between those two. Now, there's only one other thing that I want to show you guys that'll kind of help you look at these transmissions and determine which one you have on the car and which one you are going to want when you purchase a car, or if it really matters to you. The last thing I want to show you is a CV joint. So I'm going to go ahead and get out this transmission and show you guys exactly what the CV joint looks like and how that connects to the differential as opposed to the Hardy Spicer and the yoke system that I've already showed you. All right, so the last thing I'm going to show you guys here is a gearbox that's out of the car. I don't actually have a car with a CV joint set up and in the car, so I'm going to show you one outside of the car. And what we're looking at here is a kind of top-down view of the gearbox and the part where normally you'd kind of be sitting in the passenger compartment if you were looking at the motor from this angle. And on the back here, you're going to see that this is a rod change differential. So you can see right out the back there, that bottom piece is your rod change gear selector. And then if we come back up to the side here, this is your CV joint. Now, the CV joint is what replaces the Hardy Spicer or the yoke joint system, but it does the same job of spinning those tires and making sure that you can deliver the power from the car and from the motor to the wheels. All right, that's it for part 3 of the Mini Buyer's Guide on Classic Mini DIY. I hope you found the video helpful. If you have any questions about anything that I covered in the video today, just go ahead and post them in the comment section below. I'll try and answer them if I can. Also, big thanks to 7 Enterprise for sponsoring the channel. They help provide a lot of the cool parts and tools that you guys see me use on this channel. Go and check them out if you're looking for some affordable car parts for your Classic Mini, or if you're looking for some really great support from some really cool people. Otherwise, that's it for Classic Mini DIY today. Enjoy those minis and motor on.